looking for statistics about longevity, you need look no further than the ONS website. On the website, there's a page called Estimates of the Very Old, including centenarians. It tells you that the population aged 90 and over is less than 1% of the UK population. But it also tells you that over 570,000 people were over that age in 2016. That's more than ever before, and it's a population that has grown more over the last 15 years than any other demographic. Maybe soon the Office of National Statistics will rename the very old simply old, and that will make some of us in this room feel a little younger. But the population is changing, and in a moment our first speaker, Professor Linda Grattan, will explain to us how the structure of learning, working and retiring needs to change too. Pensions are changing. That's why in 2015 we became the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association. And why a year ago I announced that we would be reviewing our governance arrangements at the PLSA. I said we needed arrangements that would enable us to respond to change and rules and structures that enabled us to do that effectively, so that you can get value for money from us, and together we can make policy that works. At the moment, that's not easy. Our rules are set in our Constitution, and our Constitution was written in 1973. In 1973, there was an economic storm brewing, and a weakening Prime Minister was about to announce a general election that would result in a hung Parliament. Sound familiar? Bizarrely, however, also in 1973, we entered the European Economic Community. Now it feels like a very long time ago. And despite numerous amendments over the last 44 years, our Constitution remains largely unchanged. It's very rigid, but it's also full of holes. For example, we can't change who's on the board and on the councils, but we can contrive to make it impossible to run them. We could disband councils, we could hold no elections, and we could co-opt whoever we wanted to, in whatever way we wanted, onto those councils. We could have a single council and board made up of the same people who had all been selected by the CEO. We could actually have no councils at all, which would mean there would be no chair. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. But anyway, we wouldn't do that. It would be no way to run a membership organisation, but none of that would be against the current rules. And there are absurd pieces of rule, or absurd rules in our Constitution that we've had to amend in a piecemeal way at AGMs. It's kind of like the way that successive governments have fiddled with pensions, making them confusing, cumbersome and unclear. Our Constitution is complex, it's unwieldy, and it lacks transparency. So on Friday, we're going to ask members to vote to scrap the Constitution and start with a brand new set of Articles of Association. Those articles will result in simpler rules that are more transparent, rules that mean we can act faster in response to change, and that will give more power to our members with whom we will have to consult, and members will be able to revoke anything that we do introduce. This will make the PLSA, we think, more transparent, more flexible, and you'll be able to see better what we're up to, and we'll be able to respond to our ever-changing world. Of course, members might decide that actually our structure should stay more or less the same, and they can do that. But we think that there are better structures, ones that are less bureaucratic, that can bring our diverse membership together, improve the way that we make policy, and give better value for money to our members. And so we're going to launch a consultation at the end of this month about those rules. Our first proposal on that consultation will be that we have a single body that gives strategic direction to our policy work. One that can take into account the views of all of our members. We've had a DB and a DC council for 5 years now, but increasingly over that time, we've had policy work that has cut across both councils, so things like the dashboard and pension schemes bill. We've also found that we've had to create new bodies that are not quite part of the council, ones that to address particularly technical areas where we've needed to bring people in from outside the council, such as the DB task force. And bodies where we found that we've got a discrete group of members who want to talk about things that are specific to them. Master Trust Committee would be an example of that. And because of that, we have to manage several bodies, and that's not really working very well. We think we can create something that is more flexible and has a stronger oversight, that enables us to prioritise effectively across the whole spectrum of our membership. And that's why we think a single body, and we're giving it the working title, the Policy Board, would be the right way to do it. It could give us strategic oversight, policy positions that work well for everyone, and do that much more quickly. Now, of course, we'll only introduce a policy board if you support that. We think it's right, but we do know that there are lots of alternatives. And it's the opinion of one group of people. And that brings me on to talking about our main board. Now, I'm very fond of the other people on my board, and I hope they feel the same way about me. In fact, I rather think they do. Because if we're diverse, it is really only by accident. The board of the PLSA is made up of people from councils. So the chairs and the vice chairs sit on the board, and anybody else that we bring onto the board has to come through council. Now, none of the people on the board are shrinking violets, but we are all a bit geeky. We're all really interested in pensions policy. And for someone that spent the last 2 years on stage talking about the importance of diversity, that's a trifle uncomfortable. Now, I should say we do have one independent non-executive director, but poor John does have his work cut out, trying to keep us focused on things other than our interest in pensions. A board made up entirely through council members is also unstable. We could all get voted off at the same time, which would mean there'd be a whole new load of people to induct in board proceedings. And more importantly, it means that developing long-term strategy is quite difficult, and monitoring progress against it is too. So we want to create a board that has more stability, more independence, and we want to ditch the requirement for policy people to sit on that board. Now, don't get me wrong, we do need to make sure that members who are interested in pensions are very well represented, but we can introduce some best corporate practice into the way that we do things, make sure that we avoid groupthink, and bring in a range of skills necessary to run a board in a commercial way, by design rather than just by accident. Now, don't get me wrong, we won't change this without your support, but we think that a more modern, forward-thinking, effective and responsive board would be the right thing to have. So we have 3 proposals to put to the membership: a new set of articles, a new policy board, and a more independent PLSA board. I just feel here I should reassure you that I've had plenty of challenge from my board members over the last 2 years, and Richard, when he takes over on Friday, will not have an easy ride. Now let's talk about the conference. Our conference is about the future. Professor Linda Grattan starts us off as she talks about longer futures for all of us. And then we're saving for the future as Graham, Greg, Steve, and those brave people from last year's conference challenge come back on stage and tell us how they've been saving over the last 12 months. Then we'll consider improving outcomes in the future as the 3 independent advisors on automatic enrolment and one of our own specialist working groups hitting the target explain what they've been thinking about. The gig economy looks like it's here to stay. And if we're serious about better retirement incomes for everybody, we need to consider how to include them. I'm delighted that on Thursday, we're going to be joined virtually all day by the new Pensions Minister, and I'm sure he's going to talk about his future agenda for pensions. On Friday, we will really push the boundaries, and a group of experts will talk about how we can make pension savings an experience rather than just a process. And of course, we're never satisfied with just containing ourselves to pensions at this conference, and so we are going to cover the future of mankind and artificial intelligence. And then on Friday, Richard Butcher takes over from me. Maybe he is the future of mankind. And finally, on Friday, we are joined by Matt Fry, who is an experienced observer of UK and international affairs, and I'm sure he will be very candid in his views about our future as Brexit unfolds. There's lots of other things going on at the conference. We have 3 made simple guides supported by Schroders, Cardano Lincoln, and Equinity. We've also got our learning hub for those of you who like a more informal session. And we've got a whole new drinks reception on Thursday. And of course, there's our fantastic exhibition. Don't forget to take home lots of free gifts from the kids. I saw somebody running around with a zebra earlier, so I hope you enjoy all of that. Now, I can't sign off without speaking just once more about the importance of diversity. We've got lots of diverse speakers and topics at the conference. And as you think about decoding the future, think about your unconscious bias and how that might limit the way that you do that. I'm going to fess up and give you a taster of my own. A few weeks ago, we had a hot topic seminar at the PLSA on diversity. And I didn't know all of the speakers. One of our large consulting members sent along a very young lady, and she was frankly quite glamorous, and she was speaking along